There's a story I once heard about a man who spent years building a bridge. Not a literal bridge, a metaphorical one. Every morning, he'd wake up before sunrise, lace up his boots, and go back to the site. The work was hard. Most days he was alone. He was laughed at, ridiculed. Storms came, floods washed away months of effort. But every morning he came back and laid one more stone. And when asked why he kept going, his answer was simple: because there's someone on the other side who needs to cross. That is the power of purpose. When we talk about developing an unbreakable positive mental attitude, most people start by thinking it's about staying cheerful, looking on the bright side, or repeating affirmations, but those are the outcomes, not the foundation. If we want to talk about building something unshakable, something that holds strong under pressure, we have to start deeper. We have to begin with the question, why? Why do you get out of bed in the morning? Why do you choose to keep moving forward even when it's hard? Why does it matter that you don't give up? Most people don't know. Not really. They might say for my family or for my job or because I have to, but that's not purpose, that's obligation. An obligation might keep you going for a while, but it won't make you resilient. Purpose does. Purpose is the reason you want to show up, not the reason you have to. And it's that want to, that deep inner drive that gives rise to a mental attitude no setback can defeat. People with unbreakable positivity don't see life through rose-colored glasses. They see it fully, the pain, the uncertainty, the disappointment, and still choose hope. Still choose progress, still choose to believe there's something worth fighting for. But they don't make that choice because it's easy. They make it because they know their why. Think about a time when you were completely lost, mentally, emotionally, maybe even spiritually. And now think about what helped you find your way back. I promise you, it wasn't a quote on the internet. It wasn't some surface level motivational video. It was something or someone that reminded you of your reason, something that reconnected you to meaning. That's the core of positive attitude, meaning. We confuse positive thinking with denial, but positivity isn't denying reality, it's choosing how to respond to it. And our ability to choose to respond, not react, comes from a sense of direction. That direction is purpose. And there's a reason that in the most grueling military training in the world, like Navy SEAL Bud/S, they don't just test physical strength, they test the why. Because once your body is done, it's your mind that has to carry you. And the mind can't carry you far without a reason. The recruits who quit didn't suddenly become weak, they lost their why. The ones who stay, who push past what looks humanly possible, they've anchored their pain to purpose. A purpose-driven mind reframes struggle. When we know why we're doing something, discomfort becomes part of the process, not a sign to stop. Just like a mother endures labor, not because she enjoys pain, but because she knows what's on the other side. That's not toxic positivity. That's clarity. That's power. I remember talking to a teacher in an inner city school who was chronically underfunded, overwhelmed, and constantly dealing with systems that seemed designed to fail, and yet she smiled every morning. She found joy in the smallest breakthroughs. When I asked her how she stayed so positive, she said, "Because I teach him," and pointed to a boy in the back who just weeks earlier had been labeled unreachable. She had found her why in a sea of reasons to give up. That's what keeps people going. That's what makes a mental attitude bulletproof. If you want to develop a truly unbreakable, positive mental attitude, you have to stop chasing motivation and start chasing meaning. Motivation is unreliable. It comes and goes with the weather. But meaning roots you. It reminds you who you are and what you're fighting for. The good news is that purpose isn't something you're born with or without. It's something you uncover. And the way to uncover it is to ask better questions. Not what do I want to achieve, but what problem am I willing to struggle for? Not what makes me happy, but what makes me come alive even when it's hard. Because the truth is, what makes us come alive rarely comes easy. And the things worth having rarely come without resistance. Your purpose might not be grand or glamorous. It might not be what society puts on a billboard. It might be as quiet as showing up for your little brother. as humble as helping someone learn to read, as steady as building a business that puts people first. But whatever it is, once you know it, you'll have something no challenge can take from you. Direction. When life hits, and it will, the people who bend and break are the ones who are walking without direction. But the ones who rise, the ones who find light in the middle of chaos, are the ones who remember their reason. They may get knocked down, but they don't stay down, because they're not just standing for themselves, they're standing for something. We all want to feel positive, hopeful, strong, but positivity isn't a feeling, it's a choice born out of clarity. And clarity begins with why. So if you want to develop a mental attitude that doesn't crumble in the face of uncertainty, that doesn't shatter when plans fall apart, don't start by trying to think happy thoughts. Start by asking yourself why it matters that you keep going. Who are you doing this for? What future are you helping build? What cause are you tied to? Because once you know that, truly know it, you won't have to force a positive mindset. You'll become it. There's a fundamental misunderstanding about failure that quietly undermines our ability to grow. We've been taught, consciously or not, that failure is something to be avoided, something shameful, a mark of weakness. But what if that's the wrong lens entirely? What if failure isn't the opposite of success, but the raw material it's made from? I met an entrepreneur once who had started 4 companies and watched 3 of them collapse. One failed in its first year. The second crumbled due to a flawed partnership. The third made it to market only to be outpaced by a faster, leaner competitor. And yet, when you spoke to him, there wasn't a trace of bitterness in his voice. There wasn't even regret. In fact, he called those failures the tuition I paid to learn how to build something real. That mindset didn't come from blind positivity. It came from a decision, the decision to redefine failure. When we're young, we're rewarded for getting it right. The gold star, the A+, the praise. We learn that success equals approval. And so we grow up terrified of getting it wrong. But here's the truth that no one tells us early enough. If you're doing anything meaningful, anything worth your energy, your heart, your life, you will fail along the way. It's not a flaw in the journey, it is the journey. The people we admire most didn't get there by avoiding mistakes. They got there by refusing to be defined by them. Look at anyone who's done something impactful. A leader, an artist, a builder, a parent. And beneath their story is a pattern of falling down and getting back up. Over and over again. And here's the powerful distinction. They didn't see those moments as defeat. They saw them as instruction. Failure is not the end, it's feedback. And when you treat it as feedback, you begin to extract lessons that make you stronger. That's how a positive mental attitude becomes unbreakable. Not because you never fall, but because falling teaches you how to rise smarter, more aware, more focused. Resilience isn't stubbornness, it's adaptation. I remember sitting across from a young woman who'd just been let go from her dream job. She was devastated. She'd built her entire identity around that title, that paycheck, that office, and in a moment it was gone. I asked her one question: what did this teach you about yourself that you didn't know before? She paused, thought, and then said that I confused being valuable with being validated, and now I get to rewrite that. That's the beginning of transformation. That's what happens when we stop running from failure and start listening to it. We are forged in adversity. It's uncomfortable, it's messy, and sometimes it's humiliating. But growth doesn't happen on the mountaintop, it happens in the valley. When you're not sure if you can take another step, but you do anyway, that's where the shift happens. And that shift is what makes a positive mindset real. Not shallow optimism, but a grounded belief that even this can shape me into something better. When adversity hits, most people ask, why is this happening to me? But the stronger question is, what is it trying to teach me? Because when we reframe failure from punishment to process, we change our relationship with it entirely. It becomes a partner, not a threat. The irony is that the more we avoid failure, the more fragile we become. Like muscles that never experience resistance, we weaken. But when we embrace challenge, not recklessly but intentionally, we build strength, mental strength, emotional durability. And those qualities are the foundation of true positivity, not the kind that pretends everything's fine, but the kind that says, this hurts, and I'm still going. Think about the people you trust most, the ones you go to when things fall apart. They're not the ones who've never failed. They're the ones who've been through hell and came back wiser, calmer, more compassionate. Why? Because adversity has a way of sanding down ego and sharpening perspective. It makes you more human, and being deeply human is where real strength lives. In one of the worst years of my life, when everything I had built professionally fell apart, I remember waking up with this crushing sense of failure. Not just that I had failed, but that I was a failure. That's a dangerous conflation, and one we all fall into. We begin to confuse the event with our identity, but they're not the same. Failing doesn't mean you are a failure. It means you're learning something that couldn't be learned any other way. And when I finally stopped running from that truth, when I faced the rubble of my own decisions, I discovered something unexpected. A new clarity, a new humility, and strangely, a new strength. Not the loud kind, the quiet kind. The kind that says, I've been knocked down before, and I know how to get back up. That's the beginning of an unshakable mindset. Not being untouched by pain, but becoming intimate with it and not letting it define you. When you understand that failure is not your enemy, but your instructor, you gain freedom. You start to experiment again, take risks again, dream again. Because failure no longer holds the power to destroy you. That entrepreneur I mentioned earlier, the one who lost 3 companies, he went on to build his 4th into a mission-driven business that now impacts millions of people. And when I asked him what made the difference, he said, the first 3 taught me what not to do, but more importantly, they taught me who I needed to become. That's it. That's the shift. Every stumble holds a mirror. It shows you where your blind spots are, where your insecurities lie, but it also shows you what you're made of. And the more times you walk through failure and come out standing, the more you realize you can face anything. That's the forge. That's where character is built, where optimism becomes grounded, where your positive mindset stops being conditional and becomes part of who you are. So if you want to build an unbreakable positive attitude, don't avoid failure, invite it. Learn from it, grow through it, let it break what needs to be broken, your ego, your assumptions, your illusions, and let it refine what needs to remain. Your courage, your integrity, your why. Because in the end, failure isn't something to fear, it's something to thank. There's a moment in everyone's life where they think they're the problem. They're trying their best, they're staying disciplined, they're saying the right things, doing the work, reading the books, and still they're stuck, frustrated, worn down in the edge of burnout. And in that silence, a dangerous idea creeps in. Maybe I'm just not good enough. But most of the time, it's not them. It's the room they're standing in. It's the people around them. It's the conversations they're absorbing without realizing it. The truth we don't hear often enough is this. Your environment is either reinforcing your strength or eroding it. Your mindset is not just an internal project. It is built, challenged, and shaped by who you surround yourself with. If you want to build a positive mental attitude that holds up under pressure, you have to be radically intentional about your inner circle. There was a young man I mentored years ago, brilliant, talented, creative. He had a fire in him, that hunger to do something meaningful. But every time we met, he looked more exhausted. I'd ask him how his week had been, and he'd sigh. Not because of the work, but because of the people around him. Friends who mocked his ambition, colleagues who tore others down just to feel powerful, a family that encouraged safety over passion. And one day I asked him a simple question. How do you expect to stay lit if everyone around you is pouring water on your fire? That was the moment he realized something profound. Positivity is not sustainable in isolation. It needs reinforcement. And so does resilience. We talk so much about self-discipline, grit, mental toughness, and yes, those matter. But even the most self-driven person eventually breaks down if they're constantly surrounded by negativity, not because they're weak, but because no one is immune to the weight of toxic influence over time. That's how strong minds erode, not in one blow, but in daily exposure to voices that plant doubt, mock growth, and drain energy. There's a powerful study where researchers observed how the behavior of a single negative person in a group could bring down the performance of an entire team, not because that person was louder or smarter, but because negativity spreads faster than hope. It's contagious, but so is strength, so is encouragement, so is belief, and that's the invitation. Build a circle that reflects who you want to become, not who you're afraid to leave behind. People often think loyalty means staying in every relationship you started with, but real loyalty is to your growth, to your values, to your purpose. The truth is, not everyone can go with you. And that's hard, especially when it's people you've known for years. But if someone is constantly undermining your progress, with sarcasm, with doubt, with silence when you need support, you have to ask yourself, is this connection helping me become more of who I am or less? You don't need 100 people in your corner. You need a few real ones. The ones who challenge you when you're making excuses, who remind you what you're capable of when you forget, who see the person you're becoming and speak to that version of you, even when you're not there yet. One of the most powerful moments in any person's growth journey is when they realize that energy is more important than approval, that you don't need everyone to agree with you, like you, or even understand you, but you do need people who energize you. Because energy builds momentum, and momentum builds belief. I worked with a CEO once who was struggling to lead with vision. Every strategy session felt flat. Every bold idea was met with resistance. His executive team, though brilliant, had become a culture of caution. We can't do that. That's not how it's done. It's too risky. And I asked him, what would happen if you changed the room, not just the plan? So he did. He brought in new energy, new minds, people who weren't afraid to ask, what if? Within a year, that company had not only grown, but it had rekindled something more valuable than profit, purpose, sometimes the breakthrough. Isn't a new tactic, it's a new table. Look around your life. Who do you spend the most time with? What are those conversations doing to your mindset? Are you being pulled forward or held in place? Are your ideas being nurtured or mocked? Are your values being affirmed or slowly compromised? You can't build an unbreakable positive attitude while staying surrounded by people committed to seeing the worst. It's like trying to stay dry in a downpour while standing still. You either move or you get soaked. This doesn't mean cutting people off harshly or turning cold. It means recalibrating proximity. You can still love people from a distance, still care about them, but your mental environment is sacred. If you want to lead, if you want to grow, if you want to remain strong in the storms of life, then you need voices around you that protect your fire, not extinguish it. Find people who remind you of your why, who speak life when you doubt yourself, who celebrate your wins and hold you up in your losses, who don't just agree with you but challenge you in a way that sharpens, not shames. Those are the people who help build something unshakable inside you. Because it's not just what they say, it's who they are. Their presence reminds you of who you are. We become like the people we spend the most time with, not immediately, but inevitably. That's not a cliche, that's neuroscience. Mirror neurons, emotional resonance, culture. And if that's true, then the single greatest investment you can make in your mindset isn't just what you read or what you say to yourself, it's who you allow into your daily orbit. You want to develop a mental attitude that doesn't bend under pressure. Build it on purpose. Reinforce it with people, because a strong mind in a toxic space will always lose to time. But a mind that is surrounded, supported, and seen, that's the kind of strength that lasts. There's a voice that speaks to each of us every single day. It starts the moment we wake up. Sometimes it whispers, Other times it shouts, but it's always there in the background of our thoughts, shaping how we see the world and how we see ourselves. That voice is the story we tell ourselves. And here's the truth most people miss. Your attitude doesn't begin with your circumstances, it begins with your story. Most people believe their mindset is a reaction to the world around them. That if life is good, they'll feel strong. If things go wrong, they'll feel weak. But that's not how it works. Our thoughts, our focus, our outlook, all of it starts with the meaning we assign to what's happening. Two people can go through the exact same situation and walk out of it with completely different mindsets. Why? Because they told themselves two different stories. I remember sitting down with a leader who had just experienced a massive professional setback. A product launch had failed, a partnership dissolved, the company's stock took a hit. Everyone was expecting him to spiral. But he was calm, clear, focused. I asked him, how are you not shaken by all this? He smiled and said, because I'm not telling myself this means I'm doomed. I'm telling myself it means something's breaking, so something better can be built. He wasn't in denial. He wasn't ignoring the facts. He had simply chosen the lens through which he viewed the facts. And that choice changed everything. Because when you control the narrative, you reclaim the power to respond instead of react. We've all experienced moments when life catches us off guard. A relationship ends, a door closes, a plan fails, and immediately the voice starts, I'm not enough, I always mess up, this is just like before. These stories aren't always logical, but they're deeply emotional, and if we're not careful, we start to live as if they're true, but they're not, they're just stories. And stories can be rewritten. One of the most dangerous things we do is confuse our thoughts with the truth. Just because you think something doesn't make it real. Just because you feel hopeless doesn't mean you are. Just because a voice says you're stuck doesn't mean there isn't a path forward. The power lies in stepping back, pausing long enough to ask, is this story helping me or harming me? I met a young woman once who had been through an incredibly difficult chapter in her life. She had lost her job, her home, and was struggling with anxiety. Every morning, she'd wake up and tell herself, I'm failing. That was her inner monologue, over and over again. Until one day, she asked herself, what else could this mean? And she realized, maybe this wasn't failure. Maybe it was a transition. Maybe this was the uncomfortable middle between what had ended and what hadn't yet begun. That small shift didn't change her situation overnight, but it changed her. And eventually, she rebuilt, not just her life, but her sense of self. The stories we tell ourselves shape the limits we place on ourselves. If you believe you're powerless, you won't act. If you believe you're not worthy, you won't try. If you believe the future holds nothing for you, you'll stop walking toward it. But here's the beautiful part. Belief is not fixed. It's chosen. And that means it can be changed. I'm not saying you lie to yourself. I'm saying you lead yourself. There's a difference. Positivity isn't about pretending everything's fine. It's about choosing to focus on what's possible, even when what's real feels heavy. It's not about ignoring pain, but about refusing to let pain be the whole story. We've all heard the phrase self-fulfilling prophecy. What we believe tends to come true. Not through magic, but through focus, through energy, through action. If you believe nothing good will happen, you stop looking for opportunity. If you believe no one can be trusted, you push people away. If you believe you don't have what it takes, you'll find proof everywhere you look, not because it's reality, but because it's the lens you're using to interpret reality. You want to develop an unbreakable, positive attitude? Start with a story you tell yourself when things don't go according to plan. That's the moment it matters most. It's easy to be positive when life is smooth, but the real test is what you say to yourself when it's not. The most successful people I've met, not just in business, but in life, are masters of the internal narrative, They've trained themselves to find meaning in the mess, not toxic positivity, but grounded interpretation. They ask better questions. What can I learn from this? How can this grow me? What is this making possible that wasn't possible before? That kind of thinking doesn't come naturally. It's not instinctive. It's trained. It's repeated. It's built over time, like a muscle. And the more you practice it, the stronger your mindset becomes. Not because life gets easier, but because you get more skilled at navigating it. I once kept a journal for 90 days. Every night, I'd write down the hardest part of my day, and then challenge myself to write a better story about it. One that didn't ignore the pain, but gave it meaning. One that didn't just dwell on the problem, but explored what it might be making room for. By day 90, I hadn't eliminated difficulty from my life. But I had changed the tone of the voice in my head. And that changed how I felt, how I showed up, how I led. It doesn't take years to shift your narrative. It takes intention. It takes attention. Every time you catch yourself spiraling into an old story, pause. Ask, what am I telling myself right now? And then ask, is there a better way to see this that still honors the truth but fuels growth instead of fear? This isn't about motivational slogans. This is about psychological ownership. Because when you own the story, you own your strength. And when you own your strength, you step into a mindset that isn't reactive. It's resilient. That's how a positive attitude becomes unbreakable. Not because you're untouched by hardship, but because you refuse to be defined by it. Because no matter what happens to you, the story you tell about it remains in your hands. And that, more than talent, timing, or luck, is what will determine who you become. There's a reason why the best athletes in the world train even when they've already mastered their skills. Why the most respected leaders still wake up early, journal, or reflect, even after decades of success. It's because they understand something most people miss. Greatness isn't a goal, it's a rhythm, a way of life. And the same is true for a positive mental attitude. It's not something you have, it's something you do. Most people treat positivity like a personality trait. She's just naturally optimistic. He's just a happy person. But that's not how it works. Positivity isn't luck. It's not DNA. It's not a switch you flip once and never touch again. It's a discipline, a commitment you make every single day, especially on the days when you don't feel like it. Especially on the days when life gives you every reason to give up on it. There was a soldier I once met who had returned from deployment and was struggling to adapt back to everyday life. Not because he didn't want to, but because his mindset had been shaped by years of survival, suspicion, constant alertness. He'd learned to scan for threats. He told me, even when nothing's wrong, I feel like something's about to go wrong. And what struck me was what he said next. So I started training my brain the same way I train my body. I sit down every morning and write down 3 things that are going right. Not perfect, just right. I don't always feel like it, but I do it anyway. That wasn't sentiment, that was structure. A man rebuilding the way he thought, 1 page at a time. That's what daily discipline looks like. And if someone who has seen the worst of the world can train himself to look for the best in it, so can we. The problem isn't that people don't want to be positive, it's that they expect positivity to show up for them instead of being something they show up to. And then when it doesn't magically appear, they assume it's not for them. But the truth is, it was never about luck, it was always about consistency. We brush our teeth every day, not because our breath is terrible, but because we know that small habits prevent bigger problems. But when it comes to our thoughts, we just let them run wild. We wait until they spiral, until we're overwhelmed, until we're burned out. And then we try to fix it with a quote or a weekend off. But mindset doesn't work like that. Just like physical health, mental strength is built in micro moments. In the quiet decisions you make when no one's watching, in how you start your morning, how you speak to yourself after a setback, whether you give your energy to doubt or direction. I knew an entrepreneur who had built an incredible business. From the outside, he looked unstoppable, but privately, he struggled with crippling anxiety. And when I asked him how he handled it, he didn't talk about therapy or medication or some grand breakthrough. He said, every day I run. Not because I love running, but because it's the 1 hour a day where I remember that I can keep going even when it hurts. It's my proof. That stuck with me because he wasn't chasing motivation, he was training momentum. That's the difference. Too often we wait to feel good before we act, but if you only take action when you feel strong, you won't take action very often. Discipline means you choose to act regardless of the feeling, and that's what creates the feeling in the first place. You don't wait for positivity to strike, you generate it. And you do it by building rituals, habits, rhythms, simple practices that center you, ground you, and pull you back into alignment when life tries to shake you. They can look like 5 minutes of silence before the day starts, a short walk after a hard meeting, a text to someone who lifts your spirit, a gratitude note you write to yourself before bed. These aren't dramatic gestures. They're small, deliberate decisions that create mental resilience over time. Like compound interest, invisible in the short term, undeniable in the long term. The mistake many people make is thinking that if a practice doesn't feel powerful immediately, it must not be working. But that's like planting a seed and digging it up every day to check if it's grown. Real change is quiet. It happens in layers. It happens in repetition. And the people who develop a truly unbreakable mindset are the ones who trust the process long before